how to create the right capital for your startup and just life in general. I'm going to show you a model that I've been using that I learned and adapted through my time in China. And when I was in China, I faced some severe financial difficulty. Long story, but it was kind of an all-in moment. And I had to get very theoretical and review just the way that I approached capital, money. And this is based off of Dr. Yongling Tang's 6G management theory. He is a mentor of mine. He's the CEO of one of our companies. We're general partners together, co-founders together in several ventures out of China. And I've been a student of his since 2018. And I've learned some pretty cool stuff in terms of this East meets West philosophical merger integration that served me really well. So let me set the stage for you. Many founders, entrepreneurs, professionals come to me and say, oh, if I only had more money, if I only had more financial capital to invest or to, handle the budget, to be able to do things with, to run the company, or if I could just make more money from customers, we would be okay. Maybe you're bootstrapping your business. And I understand, I get it. It's really easy to say it's all about the financial capital. But through my years of practicing this and it working out for me, I've realized that there's more than just financial capital. There's actually many other forms of capital. In fact, 6 other forms of capital other than the financial capital. So I'm going to take you into class, if you will, into a university classroom. I'm going to give you some theory and then stick with me. This gets, a little philosophical, metaphysical, a lot of theory behind it. But I assure you, if you stick through it and just learn some of these principles, I think you'll have a different view about how to capitalize your business and your life in general. Let's take a look, shall we? Here we've got the model, and in the center of the model is you. And the first step, you need to become a metacapitalist. What is a metacapitalist? Well, think of the term metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. So metacapitalist is sort of thinking about the way you think about money, or what is the capital of capital, to go a little deeper. And you want to think, okay, I'm going to step back and just not think about capital the same way I have. I'm going to rethink it. And I'm going to challenge my thinking about the way I think about capital, or how do I think about capital that's going to lead to capital, is really what it comes down to. I know you might have a headache already, and stick with me. Now, what I found is that there's always going to be a paradox. There's always this tension of opposing forces when it comes to anything that's going to create good things. Life is going to come out of paradoxical harmony because the world is filled with these contradictions. It's just simple of day and night, light and shadow type thing. You can't have shadow without light, and you can't have light that's not going to create shadow somehow. And this is how it works. And so there's this constant tension when it comes to capital between management, which is surviving, and leading, which is going to be thriving. And just keep this in mind, because you're always going to have to be balancing back and forth. It's kind of like a seesaw, or walking on 2 legs, where sometimes you're on one leg and sometimes you're off balance and what have you. And so when you start making decisions using this system, this framework, you're going to have to be finding this paradoxical harmony between 2 seemingly contradictory forces of management for survival and leadership for thriving. All right. So what you're going to do is, as a metacapitalist, you're going to say, I am going to serve and start to generate social capital. And how it works is you take on the value and you believe giving is getting. And that, again, may seem contradictory, and that's where that paradoxical tension starts to happen. A lot of entrepreneurs go out, or business people go out, and they're just trying to get. And this happens to me all the time. Let me give you an example. Like, some people are just like, hey, Ed, just send me referrals, just send me referrals, just send me referrals. And they haven't accrued any social capital whatsoever. The same thing happens with investors and investor introductions. I've developed a relationship with investors, and I have sources where, yeah, people could invest money, but those have been developed. It cost me social capital to go to those contacts. And so many people, they just try and get those referrals without developing any social capital whatsoever. Now, it's a paradox. There's tension. Sometimes I will, giving is getting. I will just be generous and I'll start giving a contact. But then other times I have to manage that because survival's at stake. I don't just want to blow all my social capital on referring someone. And it's this constant seesaw battle that happens. But what you want to do is you always want to be investing your social capital and serving to gain more social capital. And it just, giving is getting. And that's the mindset. You don't know how it's going to get paid back. You don't know when it's going to come back around to you. Remember, philosophically, someone was talking and they were talking about the whole thing about loving people. And I believe that he was talking with a master monk. And he was complaining how this person always goes out and tries to love people and help people, and gets nothing in return with people who help. And this master monk said to him, well, what about all the people who've helped you that you did nothing for? And that really changed his perspective, believing that maybe it's not going to come reciprocal from that person, but eventually it's going to come around, and giving is going to be getting. We just don't know where you're going to get from. And that's the mindset. That's the change. That's the meta mindset that you go into to serve, to develop social capital. So then what happens is you want to be focusing on a North Star. I'm going to just color it in right here, North Star. And the North Star is your intellectual capital. So you're going to take you as the metacapitalist, you're going to serve and develop social capital, and then you're going to start gaining intellectual capital. And what that is just learning about stuff that's valuable to other people, especially learning how to learn, which sometimes requires unlearning and challenging just what you think. And that's where I recommend people explore first principles thinking versus analogy thinking. Analogy thinking is based on stories. Well, it always happened this way. It's happened this way to other people. It's just the story that I know, therefore it must be true. Where first principles goes, okay, let's forget the stories. What do we absolutely know for certain? And does it have to be this way? And why? It's just constantly challenging. And that's part of developing that intellectual capital. So everybody is capable of learning something and building up that intellectual capital. Everybody is. I don't care who you are. You can go learn something, or you've already learned something that could be of value. It's just a matter of managing it in a way that it becomes intellectual capital that you can invest. And what you're going to do is you're going to invest that intellectual capital into a network. So find a network, join the network. So when it comes to our network, as far as startups.com and all the founders and being a founder-based accelerator, well, that's a network. So you go in and you invest your intellectual capital with the heart of service, where you believe giving is getting. So you're just going to go out there and say, hey, I hope this is of value to you, and you're going to inject it. Maybe you're just going to put out some nuggets of information, and maybe you're going to answer some questions, or you're going to say, hey, I can mentor you in a few things. I can help you out, or I know how to serve in this capacity, and I know how to get this certain thing done in the network. And you just inject that capital and you invest it into your network. So you're connecting your intellectual capital into the network. So you're connecting with as many people in the network as possible. So then what's going to happen is that's going to generate attention, and that is going to lead to financial capital. Someone in the network is going to hire you or want to buy from you, invest in you, or something like that. This is what happens when you're raising capital for your startup, is you want to find the network of investors who are going to invest in you. Well, how do you get that network? Well, you show them something new. You give them a novel insight. You educate them. You become a subject matter expert or a thought leader to get that network's attention. So if you have an network of investors, well, guess what? You're going to have to educate them and show them something completely different. And that's what pitch decks are for. And that's the reason we want you to develop all that intellectual capital so you can wow the investors with what you know, the unique insights, how you're different, what other companies are missing. And that's what's going to happen, right? But you can do this with any network. Just join and be a part of the network and invest your intellectual capital. And eventually what's going to happen is financial capital. You're going to get investors, you're going to get customers, opportunities, partnerships are going to abound that way. But look what happens. Financial capital is very leaky because it's liquid. I was watching We Crashed the other day, and what happens is the accountant takes a cup and pops a hole in the bottom of the cup and then pours water in the top of the cup, and then the water just, obviously drains out the bottom. And everybody's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I thought you need a visual aid. What's happening in your company? This is what's happening in your company. And all the water's leaking out of the bottom. All the money is draining out. And so the only way to stop that and make sure that financial capital is released properly is to invest it into systems capital. So systems capital are all your systems, the infrastructure, different things like that. And for example, when we're looking at where to spend our money as far as investment funds are concerned, we have an investment thesis and we have all the systems in place to make sure that we're doing it right. How do we release the capital? Because we are stewards of that financial capital. And how do we release it in a way that it's going to multiply and it's going to be safe and it's not going to drain out the bottom? So always, as soon as you get that financial capital, you're thinking systems. And then what happens is the systems get invested, systems capital, and then you start getting cultural capital. Let me explain what culture is. I define culture, one of the definitions is what an organization does when nobody's looking, right? Or especially when the boss isn't looking. It's the same thing as the character of an individual, what you do and the choices you make when nobody's looking. It's the culture of a company, is the character of a company. And it's kind of a way, I also describe it as culture is your company on autopilot, right? What it just naturally does to express its values and beliefs and the way that it trusts people and just wants to exist and occur in the world. And so when everything comes together, you align, you have culture capital and everything aligns together. That's when it's a beautiful, it's like an ecosystem. And culture capital ends up creating more intellectual capital. Think of it this way. Hopefully by that time, especially if you're running an organization, it's not just you developing the intellectual capital. Out of the culture, other people start stepping in and saying, I want to serve, I want to, generate social capital by investing my intellectual capital. And that is a cultural phenomenon that just continues. And this perpetual capital machine starts to happen. And so truth be told, I'm always managing this system. I'm always trying to shore up these different stages in this. And it's not just, financial capital isn't the end all be all. There's a lot of work that goes before and then comes in after the financial capital is made. So let me summarize. Say you're sitting here and you're like, I don't have any capital. I got $1 to my name. All right, dollar to your name. What do? Well, first you become the metacapitalist. Change your mindset. So I'm going to go meta on this. Know that there's always going to be tension between managing, surviving, and lead to thrive. And I'm going to adopt giving is getting, serve so I can develop social capital. Then I'm going to take my intellectual capital. I'm going to learn how to learn. That may require unlearning. And I'm going to invest it into a network. Giving is getting, remember, just going to invest it, and I'm going to see the financial capital that comes out of it. Now, you're thinking, well, what if financial capital doesn't come out of it? Well, then there may be an issue in the previous forms of capital that's happening, because if you're truly injecting value into a network via intellectual capital, you are going to find financial opportunities. Happens all the time. Again, as founders, we say go out and talk to people, like just get network with your users, connect with your users and listen to their problems. You're going to find those financial capital opportunities. And then next is inject financial capital into systems capital, which creates cultural capital, and then the whole system starts all over again. That's how it works. Simple, right? Well, simple if you just look at it from a systemic perspective and you go, okay, well, it makes sense on paper. A little harder to do, obviously, but if you just focus on one step at a time, it works great. Now, that's the generative form of how to capitalize your life or your business. Let's talk about how you regenerate. And there's always times where capital starts to get drained, or it's just not working the same way. You're trying to figure out, how do I regenerate the system? How do I look? There's ways to diagnose what's going on. Well, what happens is, okay, say, for example, let's just use financial capital for an example. It's really easy. So money's hemorrhaging out the door. Well, guess what? This relationship is regenerative. Now it's like, okay, what are we learning, or what do we need to unlearn to help us with this financial capital issue? So for example, data always helps. If a company is losing money, they go to their accountants, just like in WeCrash, and say, give us the data on what's going on. And through that intellectual capital, you can start to, again, invest in network and then figure out how to make those decisions. That's really how it works. So anytime you have an issue with any of these forms of capital, you want to go to the regenerative aspect of it, and you want to figure out, okay, where do we need to go from here to figure out how to regenerate this form of capital? Let's take another example. Okay, let's just start off with intellectual capital up here. So you've got intellectual capital, and okay, we're not learning what's going on. Well, you want to make a systems capital injection to regenerate that. And this is where organizations say, we're not learning as an organization, we need to change the system. Microsoft is a great example of this. I'm getting into a really big case study, but when Satya Nadella came on and he said, we've gone from a culture of know-it-alls. Like, we have a culture of know-it-alls, and we want to become a culture of learn-it-alls. So look at what happened. This issue was happening. This culture of this we're know-it-alls was preventing intellectual capital. We weren't learning anything. So what do they have to do? They need to change their systems to allow for them to start learning again. And these systems were everything from the way that companies or teams were incentivized, and just the general change. And then what happens is that got changed the culture, and then this start to flow again. And again, this is a little more complex, but it's going to help you understand that this system does work. It does have a real life application, and there's plenty of examples of this all the time. So now let's look at network capital. You're like, okay, our network, what's happening to our network? Our network capital is going. Well, what's the culture? So you start looking at the regenerative. Can we take our culture and inject in a network? Maybe our culture is not quite working properly, and it's creating this kind of weird effect that's happening this way. So what you want to do, like maybe something's going on, over here, but you go back to the culture, and you want to go back to the culture. Notice how it's passing right through the social capital. So maybe you need to start injecting culture in a network, not just intellectual capital, and start figuring out what's going on. What is the culture that the network is experiencing from us? Talk about financial capital. Let's look at systems capital. Okay, the systems capital, sorry, that circle was really rough. Well, let's try that again. Okay, systems capital, it's a little better. Okay, our systems are starting to break down. What's going on? Well, chances are something's going on in the network. So what happens is maybe the system is reacting to the network versus proactively managing and having the priority straight in terms of stewarding the financial capital, which always ends up messing the culture. Right. So you're looking, and you look at the network and you say, okay, what is happening in the network? What's around us? How are the nodes doing, et cetera. And that's just a really great way. Now, a lot of times you're going to need some help. This is where organization development consultants really come into play to help you. But I'll just give you a pro tip. I'm always thinking about this when I'm looking at someone's startup and they're looking at the whole system, or I'm coaching someone and they've got capitalization issues. I'm looking through the whole system. So finally, culture capital. Okay, what's going on with the culture capital? Well, this is a real simple one. Are you investing the financial capital to make culture actually work? And a lot of companies miss the boat on this. They don't know how to financially steward their culture. In other words, is the culture generating an ROI? Do we need to inject some financial capital and some of these financial stewardship principles into looking at the ROI of our culture? Because that's eventually going to come around and there may be issues with the whole system and how it's generating. And so you need to go do a regenerative move and go, to this other system and say, okay, how is this affecting our current capital system or structure, or the amount of capital, the resources that we have in this particular area? So that's, again, sounds simple, and it's taken me many years to practice this. I hope I've given you an introduction. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to learn more. I'm always happy to give education on this. Just remember, there's more than one form of capital. And to capitalize your life or your company, your startup, what have you, consider looking at the other forms of capital, starting off with being a metacapitalist. And I cannot stress enough that whole social capital of serving, giving is getting, is the secret to this. It's how I've gotten very far, gotten into some of the great networks, and just the privilege that I've had to work with some fantastic people and be able to manage, be a metacapitalist and manage all forms of capital very well rounded. And I believe that the quality of my life and the people around me have dramatically increased because I have expanded my view of what capital is and not gotten all squirrely about the financial capital all the time. If you think about it, it's only 14% of your mind share if you're looking at all 7 forms of capital. Well, it spreads out, and it's a real unique way to approach it. Hope this has been helpful. Let me know what you think, and I look forward to catching you in the next video.